Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, June the 5th, 2024. Today I want to talk about the British general election. I've talked about it before, but I want to talk about it again in light of the fact that Nigel Farage, who is involved with the Reform Party, has decided that he is going to stand for Parliament. Now, he had said very recently that he wasn't going to stand for Parliament and that he was going to focus his energies on helping Trump get re-elected. And so he's not just announced that he's standing for Parliament, he's taking over the leadership of the Reform Party. So Nigel Farage is back, and this does have some implications. So the Conservative Party never really had any realistic chance of winning this election. Remember, the Conservative Party are the governing party at the moment. We have a general election, I think, on July the 4th, and it seemed almost certain that the Tories, that is the Conservatives, were going to lose. Now it's even more likely they're going to lose because Nigel Farage has now decided to take a central position in terms of the election campaign. So the right-wing vote is going to be split. And so Labour is, as far as I can see, in terms of what the pollsters are saying, is definitely going to win. So I'm not going to make a fool of myself by making any astrological predictions about who's going to win the British general election. And in this video, I want to consider some figures on the right, and one of those figures is Nigel Farage and sort of what was going on when he made his announcement. Another figure is Boris Johnson. Now, Boris Johnson appears to be out of politics. He's not a member of Parliament. Apparently he's making a lot of money as a speaker. But a lot of people are thinking maybe he's going to come back. I mean, after all, in Britain, like I think in many places, there is a real shortage of charismatic politicians. You know, whatever you think of Nigel Farage, he is charismatic. He is an effective speaker. He's very persuasive. It was largely because of him that Britain left the European Union. Likewise, Boris Johnson. A lot of people don't like Boris Johnson. I don't think I like Boris Johnson, but that doesn't change the fact that he's charismatic and he is an effective politician and he is an effective campaigner. And so there is the question, is he coming back? And so I thought it might be a good idea to have a look at his chart. I think there are problems for Boris Johnson. I did look at his chart before, and I sort of thought maybe he's coming back, but I think there are some real issues coming up for Boris pretty soon. Now, as far as the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson, of course, is still a member of the Conservative Party, and I suppose there was an expectation that maybe he'd go back into Parliament, maybe have another go at becoming leader of the Conservatives. The British people liked him a lot in 2019 when he got an overwhelming majority in that election. So maybe things can repeat themselves at some stage. Obviously not right now, but once Labour get elected, and once Labour start having to deal with government and start messing it up, then sure enough, the Tories are going to probably be back. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, having sort of watched British politics all my life, as obviously just as a bystander, I haven't even voted very often. But the thing is that there are times when these two parties, the Conservative and the Labour Party, when people completely write them off. I remember the early 80s, people thought the Labour Party were completely done for, no chance, but they came back. Likewise with the Conservatives, there was a time in the late 90s, people wrote them off, no chance, Tories aren't coming back. But, they came back. They always come back. Maybe this time it's different. But if anyone is writing off the Conservatives, history would suggest that that's not necessarily a good idea, that maybe the Conservatives will be back. But the question is, who are they going to be back with? Now, Rishi Sunak is the British Prime Minister, so after the general election, he will presumably stand down and the Conservatives will choose another leader. And I was looking at the odds checker, and apparently the favourite to take over from Rishi Sunak is a woman called Kemi Badenoch. And Kemi Badenoch is currently Secretary of State for Business and Trade. She is a right-winger. She is a supporter of Brexit. She is not a great fan of trans rights, as far as I can see. And a lot of people on the right in the Conservative Party think she's absolutely wonderful. So there seems to be a very good chance that she will become leader of the Conservatives after the election. And I did want to consider her chart and ask the question, is she the kind of person that would make an effective leader of the Conservatives? And how does she actually chime with the country? And that's something I want to look at. But before I look at all that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. So here is the chart for today. Usual June the 5th, 2024, set for noon, New York. And here we have 5 planets in Gemini. So half the planets are in Gemini. We've got Moon, Jupiter, Mercury, Sun, Venus. So the train has completely moved into Gemini. Over the last, a few months, we've had this block of planets moving through the signs of the zodiac. And now the block, those 5 planets in Gemini they're now in Gemini. So those 5 planets are all in Gemini. That's as Gemini as it gets. And so big Gemini emphasis, and the moon is in Gemini. Now, to be precise, the moon went into Gemini at 9:36 a.m. London time. So that would be, what would that be? 4:36 a.m. New York time, and 4:36, which would be 1:36 a.m. if you're in California, Oregon, Washington State, British Columbia, and would actually go in even earlier if you were in Alaska or Hawaii. So if you're in the Americas, then moon is in Gemini pretty much all day. If you're in Western Europe, then it will go into Gemini in the morning. And likewise, if you're in Africa. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon will go into Gemini much later, sort of in the evening. So it does depend a bit on the time zone, but by and large, the moon is in Gemini today, and I think we can treat it as a Gemini day. Even if the moon is not in Gemini, there is no doubt that there is considerable emphasis on Gemini today with these 5 planets in Gemini. Okay, 4 until the moon moves into Gemini. So it's really, we're moving into peak Gemini. After that, we're not going to see so much Gemini for some time. And so variety is going to be important. There's going to be perhaps more talking than usual, perhaps also more indecision. Gemini doesn't always like to make up its mind quickly, likes to consider one thing and another thing. Commitment's boring, isn't it, if you're a Gemini? You always want to keep your options open for as long as possible. Now, looking at some of these aspects that the moon makes as it moves into Gemini. So the first aspect the moon makes when it moves into Gemini is a trine to Pluto. So with that trine to Pluto, it is quite transformative. And as it makes for trine to Pluto, it also makes a conjunction to Jupiter. And really it starts making a square to Mercury. Sorry, a conjunction to Mercury. So what the moon is kind of doing is it's reactivating the Jupiter trine Mercury. It's reactivating the Mercury conjunct Jupiter. And so it's giving us a lot of power. And if we want to change things, now is certainly a time we can do it. I said something similar yesterday, but now you've got the moon there as well, because the moon used to be in Taurus, and the moon was in Taurus was perhaps slowing things down a bit, but now that it's in Gemini, it's joining the party. So there is just flow, and in any chart, the moon is process. So the other planets might be representations, but the moon is process. It creates the linkage between things. Without the moon, there is no movement, there is no communication. So the moon in Gemini is allowing us to really articulate ourselves. And yeah, it's helping many of us to be persuasive and to get our ideas out into the open. So that really is the main thing going on today. I think it's quite powerful, but it's quite simple. So essentially, from a geocentric perspective, you could say that there are just three main aspects: moon trine Pluto, moon conjunct Jupiter, moon conjunct Mercury. Don't forget, moon conjunct Jupiter, that is one of the most fortunate aspects in the book. Okay, moon in Gemini, okay, not quite as fortunate as moon in Gemini, moon in Taurus, moon conjunct Jupiter in Taurus, or moon conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. But I think it's still pretty good, provided we don't talk too much. If we focus too much on ideas and facts, then we might talk so much or think so much that we damage our own luck. So we've got to be a little bit spontaneous, and perhaps we shouldn't ask too many questions. Because one question too many could spoil everything. As far as the midpoints are concerned, there is this midpoint between Mars and Vulcanus. So Vulcanus is a hypothetical planet, one of Alfred Witter's hypothetical planets, and Vulcanus can represent huge power. Vulcanus is sort of connected with Vulcan, with the blacksmith, and a lot of fire, but it's quite volcanic as well. But it is about force. So you put Mars and Vulcanus together, so you get quite a powerful combination. So you've got Sun on the Mars-Vulcanus midpoint. You've got Venus on the Mars-Vulcanus midpoint. So together, that does create a lot of power, a lot of energy. And some people are going to want things done. They're going to want results, and they are going to want to assert themselves in a really major way. Now, that could be a little bit intimidating. People want things to happen now, this minute, and they're not afraid of using their power. In certain situations, they could be a bully. Is that other people trying to assert their power, or is it us trying to assert their power? On which end, if you like, on which side of the power equation do we exist? But I think that is quite important, that Sun and Venus conjunct the Mars-Vulcanus midpoint. But, just because we've got a lot of energy doesn't mean we should necessarily apply it, because there is another midpoint going on, and that is Mars is conjunct the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. See, there we go. Neptune is at sort of 28, 29 Pisces. Uranus is at 24 Taurus. So there's Mars on the midpoint. So Mars is certainly assertive. Mars wants action. Mars wants action, in Aries. But Uranus-Neptune as a midpoint can be a little bit confused. Remember what Eberton says about Uranus-Neptune: elimination of waking consciousness. So we might not be all there, but still want to assert ourselves. So we could assert ourselves without thinking properly about why we're asserting ourselves. Getting angry for no reason. Getting angry based on confusion. Angry based on our unconscious promptings. And if so, we could get ourselves into trouble. Or if it's not ourselves, it could be someone else. So people are getting angry about something and they want things to happen. They perhaps need to be treated with caution because they might not actually know what they're doing. And that would be especially the case, by the way, if they are on drugs or taking out or have been drinking. Because Uranus-Neptune as a pair could be about alcohol, could be about drugs, being influenced by them. Because, what better or what worse to eliminate one's waking consciousness than to drink alcohol or take drugs. So we need to be a bit careful about that. And it's probably not a day for no day is a good day for taking drugs, is it? But today is a particularly bad day for taking drugs. And it's also a bad day for drinking, with that, particularly if we're doing Mars stuff. So that is something that we do need to consider. Now, as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, always worth looking at. And here we go. This is the heliocentric position of the planets. Now, can you spot it? What's the main aspect there? What do you see? Because we've got to spot those 45-degree aspects. And this is an easy 45-degree aspect to spot. There is the Earth at 15 degrees 28 Sagittarius, and it's got in a 45-degree aspect to Pluto. So Pluto is at 0 degrees 38 Aquarius. So you can actually see the 45 degrees. You've got the 30 degrees of Capricorn, and you've got the 15 degrees of Sagittarius, because the Earth is halfway through Sagittarius. So you can see that Earth and Pluto are exactly 45 degrees apart. And in fact, where is Venus? Venus is here. So really, Pluto's pretty close to the sesquiquadrate. So Pluto, so you've got an Earth-Venus opposition, and then you've got Pluto making a semi-square to the Earth and making a sesquiquadrate. That's 135 degrees. That's three quarters of a cake. I think you can see that really. So we can, there's our cake. That's our one slice. That's an eighth of the circle. That's two slices here. So if you take Venus to Pluto, there you can imagine three equal slices of cake between Venus and Pluto. So what does that mean? So with Earth semi-square Pluto, it's kind of a similar message to what I was saying with Sun on the Mars Vulcanus midpoint. It's about the exercise of power, wanting to exercise power, wanting to make something happen. And with Venus involved in that, I suppose that could be power in terms of any one-to-one relationship. So any one-to-one relationship has the possibility of becoming a power struggle. and whatever the nature of a one-to-one relationship or the partnership, it's always got to be one person trying to get the better of the other. I mean, it needn't be that way, but I think that there is a tendency for that dynamic to take place. So I think we have to be a little bit careful there. If we are closely involved with another person, it might be that they're trying to assert control over us. Maybe we're trying to assert control over them. And in either scenario, I don't think that's particularly good. I mean, freedom and independence do matter. And I don't think there's much scope for general benefit from anyone being too manipulative, too obsessed with power. And that's the heliocentric picture. And I now want to look at the astrology of the 12 signs. Now, arguably, there isn't a great deal going on today. I think, well, there is. I think it is powerful. But there's not a great quantity of aspects. It's from geocentrically, as I said, it's to do with the three main aspects: Moon trine Pluto, Moon conjunct Jupiter, Moon conjunct Mercury. So logically, I should be saying less than usual for my 12 signs, but I don't know how it will work out. So anyway, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, June the 5th, 2024. Aries, you need to pay attention today. I understand that you have a lot of energy at your disposal, and you want things to happen and you want action. But ask yourself, why do you want action? What are you actually trying to achieve? And yeah, you need to pay attention, because there is some danger that if you're an Aries, you get excited about something that is not really worth the effort, or you might just not be paying attention, and you just decide something is really important and you just throw everything you've got at it, and you may end up chasing fantasies. And at best, you'd waste a lot of energy. At worst, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. So, Aries, I would suggest that you're very careful when it comes to action and how you interface with the outside world. And if in doubt, don't do it. Or perhaps you should divert some of your energy to maybe the verbal sphere. The moon's in Gemini. The moon is making a conjunction to Mercury in Gemini, making a conjunction to Jupiter. Maybe there are things that can just be said. Rather than acting, you can talk about acting. And I know that's something that, if you're an Aries, you find that really annoying. People just talk and talk and talk and they get nothing done, and that's not what life is all about. But today might be a situation when actually that is the right thing to do. So yeah, do consider that. Now, there's perhaps one exception to that, and that would be if you are considering action on a purely spiritual plane. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means, to take action on an entirely spiritual plane. I suppose you can think of sort of meditation or some kind of magic and occult. I don't know. Not really. I mean, even messing around in magic and occult does have its problems. I suppose, if there's nothing at stake, if it's harmless, that might be okay. Sort of gentle affirmations. I'm not suggesting you get into full-scale ritual magic. Then, yeah, I mean, things can always go wrong with ritual magic. you don't want to end up like Cellini in the Colosseum, calling up the hordes of hell. That can be that can be a problem. But I think that if you could just focus on something that is gently spiritual, then that might be okay. Just again, prayer, meditation, that's fine. But just putting action into the real world, feeling that you can make things happen, I think you might end up deluding yourself. And this would be particularly difficult or particularly problematic if you are under the influence, whether it's alcohol, drugs, prescription medication, whatever. If you're at all under the influence, there's a chance here of making really disastrous decisions. And so really do be careful on that score. So I think that is the main picture today. I think you do need a certain amount of caution, and if you've got things you want to do, then I would really focus on the verbal side of things, and just make whatever you're doing, make it low key. So if, for example, you were planning on making a large journey, make it a small journey. If you were planning on making a big commitment, then perhaps a half-hearted commitment. And I think that way you would, be staying out of trouble. Taurus. I think Taurus, you do need to be quite grounded today. I think that, you've got, because, we have a really big build-up in Gemini. And with that build-up in Gemini may actually have a financial implications. Because, Gemini is a sign which follows Taurus. And so with all that stuff in Gemini, you might find yourself being concerned about money and be thinking very hard about money and what you can do with money and what you shouldn't be doing with money and what could go wrong with money. So you might feel that there are a lot of decisions to be made. And I think you might be a bit overwhelmed, but I think it's going to be just very difficult not to think about money. And so somehow you've got to try to ground yourself. Now, actually, grounding yourself, Taurus, may be a bit of a problem, because when the moon moves into Gemini, something happens which hasn't happened for quite a long time. And I'll tell you what's happened is there are no traditional planets in Earth signs. And that hasn't happened for a long time, because Jupiter has been in Taurus for ages, for over a year. And now that the moon is out of Taurus in Gemini, there's nothing there except just Uranus. So there is a lack of Earth at the moment. And so from a Taurian perspective, you might find that disconcerting. You might feel that there's nothing to apply your energies to. Things that you took for granted on the physical plane just aren't there anymore. And so there might be a bit of a sense of panic, and you might be trying to create some grounding somewhere, but it's just difficult, and it's not made any easier by perhaps other people doing a lot of talking, ideas. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Maybe this possibility, that possibility. And Taurus might just feel rather confused. So you have to ground yourself, and you have to perhaps make your own decisions, and don't listen too hard to other people, because they really could be could be quite confusing. So yeah, do make your own decisions. But I should say that you are able to make things happen, and you can make things happen, perhaps through the power of your own words. You can put an enormous amount of energy into the way you communicate. And it's not that you have to say a lot of stuff, you just have to show that you're serious, that you mean it. And I think that you can actually demonstrate your seriousness. And perhaps that's the way around it, because I've talked about this issue with a lack of grounding. What are you standing on? And that might be a concern that you have. And perhaps you can create grounding through the force of your communication, just saying to people, this is the way it is. This is what I believe in. This is what's important to me. And if you have enough conviction, people will listen to you and they'll say, fine, okay, that's what you want, and that's what you'll get. And that, I think, Taurus, will give you a certain amount of security. And it's just important not to be too reliant on other people, because I'm not convinced that other people can be entirely trusted. Some people are just going all over the place, and if you were to listen to them or follow their lead, then I think you'd just be getting, I would have said, very confused. So I think you know how to handle the situation, and by exercising power, and we see power also in the heliocentric chart, because from a heliocentric view, we've got Venus making that hard aspect to Pluto, and that hard aspect between Venus and Pluto is really going to allow you to assert yourself, perhaps not in an easy way. It might feel a bit forced, but it will be clear. It will be clear that you're not someone to mess with. So I think that's the way to deal with the issue. Just be very clear. Just be clear to everyone about what you like, what you don't like, and who you are and who you're not. And that should give you the security and grounding that you really do feel that you need. Gemini. There are now 5 planets in Gemini. Big focus on Gemini. And that happens when the moon moves into Gemini. Okay, does to an extent depend on your time zone. In the Americas, very early in the morning. I think, in fact, if you're in Hawaii, that would be late last night on Tuesday evening. But if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the Gemini action, the moon moving into Gemini, is not going to take place until this evening. But if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you're not missing out on anything. It just happens a bit later. But overall, Gemini, big emphasis on your sign, and I think that this emphasis on Gemini does give you really a considerable amount of power and confidence. And yesterday I talked about the fact that there was a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, but that conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter is still very much there. In fact, you could argue that it's even more powerful today than it was yesterday, because the moon is now conjunct Jupiter and it is conjunct Mercury. So the moon is creating action, and the moon is about emotional communication. So Gemini, you can actually say what's on your mind, and your enthusiasm and your responsiveness will be absolutely on great form. And I think that you're going to be a very exciting and versatile person. And the one thing you will not be is boring. I really hope you don't find me boring. That's what Geminis hate, by the way. They can tolerate a load of things, but one thing, if you really want to if you want to really offend a Gemini, you say that they're getting boring, or you tell a Gemini, you know what, I've heard that before. Geminis hate that. Geminis really like to think that they are completely original, that they are exciting people, and the idea that you're boring and you repeat yourself, that is mortifying. Remember, I'm saying that as a Gemini. But today, I think we're interesting people, Gemini. We are interesting. And if there's any day that we're interesting, it's got to be today with these 5 planets in Gemini. So it's a time really when you can just communicate, not just in terms of routine stuff, just saying whatever's on your mind, but actually coming up with a sense of vision. And that is because the moon is making a trine to Pluto, and it's also making a conjunction to Mercury. Moon conjunct Mercury is absolutely, in Gemini, is absolutely great for communicating. And to be honest, if you're feeling under pressure and you feel that people are observing you and people are ready to criticize you and you don't know what to say, what you do is you just talk. Just talk. It doesn't matter what you say, because your talking is a defense mechanism in the first instance. Of course, I know that is communication at the most basic and primitive level, Moon in Gemini, using it as a defense mechanism. But then you can build on it, and it starts as a defense mechanism, but then in the end becomes an instrument of your genius, perhaps. So just don't be afraid to talk, because I think your words can really hit home. Of course, there's always a possibility you talk too much, Moon conjunct Jupiter, but I'm not going to say that you're going to be disciplined, because I don't think that right now there is a great deal of discipline, but I don't think you need discipline. I think that it's all about being open and spontaneous and being interesting. And that really is the key point. Now, in terms of relationships, Mercury is now separating from a conjunction with Jupiter. And it might feel in the first instance that perhaps you and someone else may be separating out, maybe becoming more distant. But the moon makes a conjunction to Jupiter, then it moves on to make a conjunction with Mercury. So in a way, circumstances can bring you and someone else back together. So if you feel you had a chance, you've missed a chance to communicate with someone, the moon can create another opportunity to talk, another opportunity to get in touch with someone. And maybe, if you feel that you've become too distant from someone, that you're losing touch with someone, now might actually be a great time to get back in touch, because it will be much easier than you think. So overall, I think it's an interesting day, and I think that you are an exciting and an interesting person. But of course, I'm a Gemini. I would say that, wouldn't I? Cancer. I get the impression, Cancer, that in some ways it might all be a bit too much. There is a lot going on today. A lot of stuff in Gemini. But Cancer and Gemini are really very different signs. Cancer is a water sign. It's about feeling. Gemini, air sign, more about thinking, communicating. Of course, from a Cancerian perspective, Geminis can just sometimes talk a load of nonsense, and they don't really get to the heart of the matter, do they? They just talk for the sake of it, and it doesn't get anywhere. And there is a certain sense of insincerity, which I think you, as a Cancerian, can pick up, and you just may feel that you just don't want to get involved in all the stuff that's going on around you. It just doesn't seem to be worth the effort. I think, though, you would be mistaken. The moon is your ruler. Yes, it's in Gemini, and I understand that you probably don't want to publicize yourself. You kind of feel that you perhaps would like to have a low profile, and the moon it's conjunct Jupiter, and so with the moon conjunct Jupiter, that is a lucky combination. It's a very fortunate conjunction, and also the moon is conjunct Mercury. So with the moon, and in fact, the moon, we can say that the moon is on the Mercury-Jupiter midpoint. So you can express yourself, and maybe Cancer, if you're really honest with yourself, you might take the view that some things have got a little bit boring. They might be safe, but are they really giving you the stimulus you need? And actually, I think, Cancer, if you perhaps recognise that you actually need some intellectual stimulation. And the question is, how are you going to get it? And it may be that the best way to get intellectual stimulation, if you're not interested in other people, which you might not be, is to read a book. Nothing wrong with reading a book. Cancerians actually like reading books. They're also very good at writing books, actually, but I want to talk about that. Yeah, Ernest Hemingway, he was a Cancerian, wasn't he? So was Hunter S. Thompson. So do some reading. Just sit there. You don't have to engage with other people. Just allow your imagination free rein, and let perhaps one of your favourite writers help you there. If reading is too much effort, I don't know, watch a film, read a newspaper, I don't know, anything like that. Just giving yourself some intellectual stimulation, because I think you need it. I'm not saying you absolutely need it, but I think you can benefit from intellectual stimulation. And I'm thinking that you can also find some stimulating company. So don't completely write off everyone you know, because there are a couple of people who can really provide you with real stimulation. So it needn't be a bad day. And I understand you do not want to have a super high profile, but just do think about your mind. Your mind does need some exercise, and you have to decide how best you want to exercise and stimulate your mind, because actually the Cancerian mind is actually very sharp and is capable of great things. Leo. At the moment, Leo, you actually have quite a lot of power. You can actually make things happen in quite a big way, and indeed, it's maybe the case that you actually don't know when to stop. If you decide that you really want something, I really think you can actually get it, just using the power of your personality. Maybe it's just willpower. Just if you want it, it can be yours. Of course, you do have to consider what the cost is. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Just because you can get something easily doesn't mean you actually should go out and get it. You might cause offence, you might cause damage, but still, if you really, really want something, I think there's every chance that you will be able to actually get hold of it. And this should be helped by your company, by the people around you. They're going to help you as well. So I suppose you can be a little bit manipulative if you want to be manipulative, and you could regard other people, friends, associates, colleagues, as just instruments of your will. But I don't want you to be famous Leos, Napoleon, Mussolini, but you don't want to be like that, do you? And so you can perhaps try to sort of moderate that a bit, and maybe try to be a little bit relaxed, because with the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, conjunction to Mercury, I think that you can benefit from people without having to push them around. Because if you're not pushing them around, you're allowing them to open up, you're allowing them to communicate, you're allowing them to tell you stuff. And that really is a way in which you can benefit from their company. And with the moon is making a trine to Pluto, and so with that moon trine Pluto, perhaps you need to think about how someone else can have an influence on you, because you haven't got all the answers. I mean, I think some Leos might right now think they've got all the answers, but they haven't got all the answers. And if you give someone a chance, they can actually have a favourable and transforming influence on you. So try to be balanced today. And yes, you've got power, but it's power that you do have to use wisely. Virgo. It's a day when there is this massive build-up in Gemini, because the moon is going into Gemini. So we've got 5 planets in Gemini. And from your perspective, the sign Gemini it's connected with your ambitions. And I think you are very ambitious. You're not happy with the way things are right now, and you'd like things to move on, and you want things to happen. And there seems to be little doubt that you can actually make things happen, but you have to work out perhaps how you're going to make things happen. I was, just talking to Leo, and I was saying how Leo just has this sort of natural power that, through their willpower, you can Leos can perhaps force people to do things their way. Now with Virgo, I think it's slightly different. It's just through words. There's this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. It was exact yesterday, but it's still very much still operational. And the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter, moon is making a conjunction to Mercury. So the words are really flowing today. And through your words, you can be convincing, and you can get people to discuss things. So if you're not happy with the way something is, you can tell someone about it. Tell them that you're not happy. Get a response from them. And you'll listen to them, and they'll listen to you. And at the same time, you can present your ideas and your vision. And I think that your vision will come over as being really very attractive and very appealing. And at the same time, with this Mercury conjunct Jupiter, where the moon is conjunct, also involved in this conjunction, that does indicate that, certain people are really going to like you, and you can sort of benefit from people, and I think they can benefit from you. So there's a lot of scope there for mutual benefit. And if you're thinking about it as being some kind of power equation where who is going to benefit, who is not going to benefit, that's not the right way of approaching it. I think you're in a situation where everyone can benefit, and everyone can benefit by talking and sharing ideas, and that is certainly the way to move forward today. Now, there is, I suppose, one aspect that I need to mention from a heliocentric view, but from a heliocentric point of view, Mercury is actually moving towards a square of Pluto, and Mercury is your ruler. So I suppose that does give you a certain amount of persuasion and persuasive ability. And obviously you're helped by the fact that the moon is conjunct Mercury. So yeah, you can be persuasive, and I think that people are going to listen to you and feel that you really have got something to say. But I wouldn't take the whole thing too far. Just because you can be persuasive, even a bit manipulative, doesn't mean that you should be. There may be other ways to get your way. As I said, just through plain discussion and argument and listening to all sides of all different points of view, then that should be enough. Libra, you do feel that things are going your way. At least I hope you do, because you're in a situation where I think a lot of things are flowing, and I think that you can also address what you want. Ask yourself, what do you want, and how can you get it? And the key, I think, really, Libra, is to identify what you want and then think about how you're going to get it in a way that uses as little energy as possible. There is absolutely no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a peanut, as they say. Just using some gentle persuasion really should be enough. But you can always escalate. If you really do have, if it's really essential, you can escalate. And in the end, it's just almost inevitable that people are going to listen to you. And I think that you probably are going to benefit from the continuing influence of this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. Yes, it's true that Sun and Venus, from this conjunction between Sun and Venus. Yes, it's true that this Sun-Venus conjunction is starting to break up, but it's still a Cazimi conjunction just. So do take advantage of it. So, there is Venus, that's you. And here is the Sun. Can be a bit problematic, the Sun. In certain situations it can blind you, can prevent you from seeing what's really going on. But when it gets really close, when the Sun is really close to Venus, like it is today, you and the Sun are on the same wavelength. So this force that could blind you, that could distract you, can actually be utilized in a kind of laser beam kind of way. And so you are perhaps able to harness the energy of the sun. I mean, I know when you talk about we talk about harness the energy of the sun, we think of hydrogen bombs and fusion and all of this kind of stuff, but that's not really what I'm talking about. You can harness the energy of the sun as a way of making, I think, a very powerful impression. And do try to be independent. I don't think you need anyone today. I mean, it's good to have people around you, to enjoy different people's company, but I don't think there's any one person who you really need. If you do think that you really need someone, though, there could be a problem. Because if your day is focused too much on one person, then you might in the end find that that one person is disappointing, is distracting, and may even be wasting your time. And that would be a shame. So, yeah, that's why I think today, Libra, independence does really matter. Because if you feel that you're reliant on someone else, then you'll find that things just don't work. Or rather, they don't work as well as they should do. Scorpio. You do have to be careful today, Scorpio. I think that you're probably not on great form. You know, for quite a few of the signs I've been very optimistic about, like I was yesterday. But I just feel that right now, Scorpio, you're not quite with it. And you are, I think, a little bit distracted. And if you think that something is important, then maybe you got it wrong. You think something really matters. You want to put a lot of energy into it. But why? What actually are you trying to achieve? Have you actually thought it through, what you're trying to achieve? Maybe you're just simply in too much of a hurry. Maybe your facts aren't entirely correct. Or just maybe you're looking at the world through a pair of glasses that are somewhat smudged. These glasses are probably completely smudged. I do need to clean my glasses probably. But yeah, your glasses or your metaphorical glasses could be somewhat smudged, and you're just not seeing things as clearly as you should do. I mean, I must emphasize here, Scorpio, that the reason I'm being negative is because I think it's my job to be negative. I'm trying to see things in the worst possible light, just in a sense to warn you. Now, it's better to err on the side of caution than to just tell you that everything is fine. It may be that everything really is fine, but I'm just kind of warning you. There is just a possibility here that you're not seeing things completely clearly, and given that possibility, it's just important that you don't take risks and that you give yourself time to work out what is appropriate behavior or what is an appropriate response. So if something happens, your first response may not be the right response. It may be that you have to think about it, feel it, and maybe after a bit of contemplation and a bit of rational thought, you'll eventually come across the right response. But don't assume that it is completely immediate. And I think that it's a day when possibly you need to ask yourself some searching questions, just so that you can really get to the bottom of things. And I think you'll actually today, Scorpio, you'll be very good at getting to the bottom of things, really understanding what something is really all about. And that means cutting through the lies and the deception. There's a lot of lies and deception around. It's the world we're living in. It's not about you. It's not about any one particular person. We are living in a world where it's very difficult to discover the truth, not just in a global and collective way, but I think also in sort of a personal way, trying to work out what is really happening in our lives. For example, if you're trying to work out how best to handle your finances, or organizational matters, it's just not easy. And by giving yourself the time to work things through, I think you'll be giving yourself the best chance of making sense of a situation. And once you've made sense of a situation, you'll be able to really start acting in a constructive and healthy way. Sagittarius. It seems, Sagittarius, that right now there is a considerable focus on the other. There's you, Sagittarius, and then there is the other. That might be represented by Gemini, because Gemini is Sagittarius's opposite sign. And today, Sagittarius, there are five planets in Gemini. And that is quite a build-up, and I think that you start to recognize how much impact the world can have on you. You're not an island. I don't think you want to be an island, and you certainly are not an island. And what happens out there has an influence on you, and a lot of your energy is wrapped up perhaps with other people's energy. So it's not a day really for being too independent. I mean, you'd like to be independent, but I think independence is going to be something that's going to be difficult to find. Also, I think that you are quite dynamic in terms of contacts and relationships and bringing people together, and this is certainly something you can do if you want to. You can actively bring people together, actively communicate, actively perhaps work out how different people have things in common. So it may be, for example, Sagittarius, today you're going to be a good matchmaker. I mean, I don't necessarily mean that in a romantic sense, but just people who have common ground. You can understand the common ground that people have, and you can bring them together for whatever reason. And at the same time, I think that you're going to benefit from a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. Remember, we had a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction yesterday, but this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is still very much in operation, because the moon is conjunct Jupiter, the moon is conjunct Mercury, so the moon is bringing Mercury and Jupiter back together again. And so you don't have to be alone. You don't have to think that it would be best to be alone, because however good things are, you could just always benefit from just a bit of outside input, perhaps realizing that you're not the only person to have a particular thought or a particular idea, but someone else who shares your thought and your idea. And if you can work out some common ground between yourself and another person, I think that could be very beneficial. And in general, I think that relationships today should really prosper. But don't feel that there has to be any preconceived way in which the relationship should work. Just let it run. Let it run its course. And I think it's just important to be natural and not to have any expectations and not to overthink the matter. Capricorn. I know that there is a fair amount going on today. I mean, at least for many people, there's a fair amount of stuff going on today. But Capricorn, I suppose you have to ask yourself whether you really want to get involved. Is it really worth your effort? Or perhaps you'd be preferring to do something else. You probably think that things just aren't properly organized, they're not sorted out. You don't want new stuff. I think there's going to be perhaps pressure from the outside world to bring new things in. New tasks, new ventures, new ideas, new complications. And I think that you're going to probably take the view, well, actually, you've got enough on your plate. The things you've got to deal with right now, they require quite a lot of work. If you bring something else in, then, there's a danger that you lose control. So I think, Capricorn, you have to be quite strict. You're not looking for excitement. You're not looking for the challenges of the new, because the old actually hasn't. You haven't worked it through yet. So perhaps that's what you need to concentrate on. So don't take on too much, and be firm with other people. I think you are going to be encouraged to take on too much, whether it's making promises to your friends, or if you're working, telling your employers you're going to do something, or people being asked to do stuff, and you kind of say yes, you're going to do it without really thinking about it, but then you find that things get out of control, and that's not something you want. You don't want any surprises, and I think there will be a few surprises, or because I think you're going to just see that other people can be really unstable. Not just people, but events around you. There's a certain lack of stability, and there just might be a few surprises today that you're not really in the mood for. You don't want surprises. You as far as you're concerned, life is complicated enough without having surprises. You've got all the surprises you need. But, on the plus side, I think that you're going to be very good at organizing things if you're left to your own devices. And I think that over time, you will be able to take control. And so just do things your way, and don't allow yourself to be pressurized. Aquarius. It's, I suppose, another day when you are feeling really quite a strong sense of yourself. You are here, you are you, and you don't have to make any real effort to make other people happy, because it's yourself that matters. And if you just remember that, then I think that things are going to be fine. And I think that's also what people want. They need a little bit of variety, and they need excitement, and they need vision. And all of that is something that you can provide. And if you're asked to, then you can talk about it. I think that the things you explain will sound very exciting, and I think that you can make it simple. Although I think many Aquarians are going to have quite a lot to say right now. It's and you may have a certain sort of, not just excitement, but maybe a certain urgency there. Just feeling that it's just important that people understand. understand what you're about and why you regard certain things as being important. But don't take yourself too seriously. This is not a day for taking yourself too seriously. I mean, I said the same thing yesterday, I think, but it's just important that you enjoy yourself. And today I say that even more because the moon has changed sign. The moon was in Taurus and it's now moved into Gemini. So, when the moon was in Taurus, that moon in Taurus was acting as a little bit of an anchor. It was grounding you, even though part of you was floating off, wanting to, look for new stuff, looking for new horizons. There was still that moon in Taurus grounding you, but that moon in Taurus is now gone. It's not in Taurus anymore. It's moving into Gemini. Okay, I understand if you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand for a great chunk of the day, the moon is going to be in Taurus, but even then, by this evening, the moon will be out of Taurus into Gemini, and that sense of grounding will have gone, and you'll be sort of adrift, but I don't think adrift in a bad way. When you're adrift, you've got the possibility of variety, and you're asking questions and you're curious, and it's just very important to be curious. If you see something that's interesting, then you need to find out about it, because you never know, it might have an impact on you. It might be fun, and it might enrich your life. You just don't know until you ask. And so curiosity, I think, is important, and it's almost expected of you. I mean, if you're not curious, then how can you really ever expect anything to happen? And particularly today. And if you want to ask a question, you might worry, is it appropriate to ask a question? No, go ask the question. Find out. I mean, do you want to not find out? Do you want to just be in ignorance? No, I don't think you do. Because I think that knowledge, as well as creativity, is going to really matter. Pisces, you benefit from a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. So remember, Jupiter's your ruler, and moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, that I think just makes you happy. I mean, it's a great aspect, moon conjunct Jupiter. And the moon is conjunct Mercury as well. So you've got a moon, Jupiter, Mercury conjunction. And I think that really helped, that really helps you to, I think, just relax and perhaps enjoy yourself, but enjoy yourself in your own way, in your own space. There's no need to, I think, go anywhere. And we've got kind of super grounding here, because we've got 5 planets in Gemini, 5 planets in arguably the most private sector of your chart, which is Gemini. And you don't really need to go anywhere to find variety. Yeah, variety does matter, but you don't have to go to the other side of the world to find that variety. You don't have to move out. You don't have to leave your. You don't have to move outside your further from your front door to find variety, because all the variety that you could ever want is just right there. It's right with you, and in a way, you are kind of the nexus for variety, and you can just be yourself and really experience the world in all its multiplicity. So don't be satisfied with any particular state or any set of ways of being, because there's always other ways of doing things. And you can just give yourself as much variety as you like. And I think that in many cases other people are going to be useful because there is a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, where the moon is involved. You know, the moon is making the conjunction to Jupiter. The moon is also making a conjunction to Mercury, and it seems that, you know, conversations taking place on your terms can be very helpful. Now, when I say on your terms, I mean within the boundaries that you yourself have set. Those boundaries may be very wide, but they are nonetheless still boundaries. You know, you don't have to put up with people coming into your life and just telling you random things that you're not interested in. There are certain things you want to hear. There are certain things that you will benefit from hearing. And that's what you need to concentrate on. So just keep in mind what actually matters. And also try to just consider things from as many different perspectives as possible. And, you know, that includes your own home and your living space. And yeah, that's, of course, something that I think I mentioned yesterday, that your home and your living space is something where you can find real variety. If you feel, by the way, that you're not getting as much as you would like from other people, from your social life, it does seem that one initiative on your part can actually bring you and someone else together, or can bring someone new into your life, or even just a new group of people. There seems to be just the possibility there of just a change in your social environment, which you can actually bring about through your conscious efforts, through just taking an initiative. And that one initiative could lead in many directions, and could actually bring, you know, new friendships, new company, you know, whatever you're looking for from other people. You can get it just by doing one thing, and it may not actually take very much effort. And that's it for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today, June the 5th, from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 62, the preponderance of the small. So preponderance of the small is indicating that today we shouldn't be aiming too high. And that perhaps contradicts a little with what I've been saying astrologically. Because, you know, I was saying, well, you know, there are these 5 planets in Gemini, there's moon conjunct Jupiter, moon conjunct Mercury, moon trine Pluto. It did seem a lot there was a lot going on, and that we could, you know, the sky's the limit. But the I Ching is providing a different view. It's saying, don't aim too high. There are limits to what you can achieve. And, you know, the warning here, symbolically, is that, you know, it's like the bird. Bird flies too high, bird can be seen. A bird flies into a net. I think the I Ching, you know, Greg Winkup, he talked about how, I don't know, how people would stretch nets across the sky as a way of catching birds. And so bird flies too high, flies into the net and gets caught. So we should be satisfied with small steps. And, you know, we don't have to achieve everything at once, just one step at a time. and we should avoid the temptation to go too far too fast. Though that is a very real temptation, because we've got the second line moving, and we've also got the top line, sixth line moving, and that top line moving is a problem. And that top line moving might just say that we just want action, we want things to happen, and we move so fast that we just completely run ahead of ourselves. We could be like the bird flying into a net, and we could get ourselves into real trouble. So don't take it too far too fast. Be satisfied with small gains, at least to begin with. And then this hexagram 62, it does move. It moves to a hexagram we've had quite recently. And that hexagram is hexagram 50, the cauldron. And the cauldron is telling us that we were right to be satisfied with just small gains. And if we want larger gains, we're perhaps going to refine who we are and what we're doing, and we may actually have to give something up, because the cauldron is about something burning, and it's just not just any cauldron. It's a sort of a sacrificial vessel where things get changed. From a perspective of alchemy, you can't get gold unless you're prepared to give up some lead. That's the idea, isn't it? In alchemy, you turn lead into gold. And so, what is that lead? But maybe we're over-attached to some lead, and we've got it. It's weighing us down, and perhaps that lead is one of the reasons why we have to take things slowly. In the previous hexagram, preponderance of the small, we can only be satisfied with small gains because we've got so much weighing us down, things that we're really attached to, but we don't really need, or not, indeed, not just don't really need, but we've got something that needs to be transformed. But it is that lead that needs to be transformed into gold. And then that's what we can do with the cauldron. We take stuff that we don't need, that is just not really going anywhere, and we transform it into something through the alchemical process in the cauldron. And as a result of that alchemical process, we just come up with something very different. And then we no longer have to limit ourselves with preponderance of the small. We couldn't fly too high. We had to keep it simple. But with the cauldron, we can change everything round, and we can start to realize our true power. And maybe that cauldron is representing a process where we are steaming away, I suppose. It's what happens in the pressure cooker, isn't it? What goes into the pressure cooker isn't necessarily what comes out of the pressure cooker. The pressure cooker, it's just amazing things, pressure cookers. It's like with rice. I'm really bad at cooking rice. I can't do it. I always get it wrong. With a pressure cooker, you just follow the instructions and it just comes out absolutely right. Cooking is not really my thing, but pressure cookers strike me as being quite amazing things. And I suppose that's the idea of the cauldron. You take something that's not really working and it transforms, and that's how you do it. But you need to take it slowly to begin with, and don't fly too high. Just bring together your resources, be prepared to give up some of them, and allow them to transform into, so that you can find the real gold in your life. And now I want to turn to British politics. I understand that British politics may not be, to everyone, the most interesting subject in the world. I think for me, with British politics, I've been concerned about politics all the time. I've got South Node in Aquarius. Um, I've got the South Node in Aquarius conjunct Saturn, and in the 11th house, if you take Placidus. And I think that's my obsession with politics. It's kind of some kind of past life stuff, something that I should have grown out of. I was far too obsessed with politics when I was younger. I got a degree. Where did I get my degree? I got my degree at the London School of Economics because I was obsessed with politics at the time. But that's South Node conjunct Aquarius. South Node conjunct Saturn in Aquarius. I was kind of forgetting my poor North Node in Leo. Anyway, I don't want to talk about myself. I just want to talk about British politics, which is probably a very South Node thing for me to do. So we've had the news on Monday that Nigel Farage is actually, he wants to get involved in the election. And so here is Nigel Farage's horoscope. I've looked at Nigel Farage's horoscope quite a lot recently. So that's his horoscope. Very fiery person. We do have a time of birth, but I kind of find it quite surprising that Nigel Farage has a time of birth. But yeah, he does. His moon in Sagittarius, sun in Aries, Mars in Aries, Jupiter in Aries. People who have that amount of fire are often very exciting. They get your attention, and I think that he is, as a speaker, he does get people's attention. People really do focus on him. Of course, a lot of people can't stand him, but he gets enough people's attention to be able to get a following. And although he's never been elected to be a member of the British Parliament, he has tried many times, but he's always failed. He has been elected to the European Parliament. Of course, in the UK, it's very difficult to get elected to the British Parliament if you're not a member of if you're not supported by one of the main parties. It's kind of like in the United States. If if you're not a Democrat or a Republican, it's just quite difficult to get into Congress. It can be almost impossible. So he had said that he wasn't going to get involved in politics, and then get involved in the election. And then he made this announcement. Now, I think this announcement was at 4:00. So here was his announcement. So 4:00 on Monday. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the moon was in Taurus. We had the Sun Venus conjunction. Notice how he had Mercury conjunct Jupiter. I mean, if you're trying to make a big announcement and to get everyone to take you seriously, doing it when Mercury is conjunct Jupiter, well, that is a great time to do it, isn't it? That's the first point. Also, Moon is in Taurus. Moon is quite close to its degree of maximum exaltation, 3 degrees Taurus. So that's probably quite good. On the other hand, the Moon does not make an aspect, a major aspect, for some time. It's about 13 degrees short of making a sextile to Saturn, and I think that's just too much. I think there's a certain sort of lack of process there. The Moon, although in Taurus, it doesn't seem to give that chart a lot of action, and we are very reliant on that conjunction between Mercury and Uranus to really make things happen. Maybe it's okay for the moon is in Taurus. It is in its exaltation. So what actually was that doing to Nigel Farage's horoscope? So let's just compare his chart with I've made it rather confusing. Nigel Farage is Nigel Farage. I just called Farage as the announcement, so sorry to have made that sort of confusing. But so this is what was going on when he made his announcement. Now, so here, have I got? Okay, so there's right. So there's his chart in the middle, and so there is. I think so. The Sun was at around 13 Gemini. So note that Nigel Farage has Gemini rising. Gemini on the midheaven. So Gemini on the midheaven, that is his ambition, what he wants to do, what he wants to achieve. And so really you could say the moment Mercury moved into Gemini, that's when he made his announcement. Now, if you are into whole signs, the whole sign house system, which an increasing amount of people are, I think, then that's very supportive of it, because from a whole sign perspective, Mercury goes into Farage's 10th house, and that is like the moment he makes his big announcement. So that seems to me to be, really powerful, because from a Placidus point of view, Mercury would kind of still be in the 9th, but it would still be pretty close to his midheaven. So with 4 planets in Gemini, it's not surprising that he finds a way to get a lot of attention. And so I would have said that overall is quite important. And he's got Mars. His transiting Mars is pretty close to his conjunction of Jupiter. That's the point where he felt he really had to do something. Jupiter represents perhaps his ideas, what he wants, and Jupiter is. I know you could say it's technically in the 8th, but it has a very 9th house feel to it. And so Mars conjunct Jupiter, he really can't help himself. And so that's when he really decided to take action. Turning to his solar arc directions. So I did his solar arc directions for the announcement, which are here. So remember, Nigel Farage has just turned 60. So he turned 60 in April. So he was born April the 3rd, 1964. So this is approximately moving every planet in his horoscope 60 degrees. And as I said, it's great that we do have a reasonably exact time for Farage. It's at 4:30 p.m. in Farnborough, obviously in the UK. So his solar arc directed Sun is at 12 degrees 16 Gemini, and his ascendant is at 11:27 Virgo, and he's got Pluto at 12:10 Virgo. So as his solar arc directed Sun squares his ascendant and squares his Pluto, that's when he wants to take action. And that solar arc directed Sun is right at the top of the chart. This is a time where I think that he really feels that he wants to take the initiative and be noticed. And if you're into the equal house system, which I don't think many people use the equal house system, but the Faculty of Astrological Studies used to, I don't know, it still does. When I did the first year course, they would really encourage you to use the equal house system. But the equal house system, so the Sun is on the 10th house cusp of the equal house system. And that seems to work quite well. I have found that point is quite important from a career perspective. So that Sun's exactly square his ascendant really was motivating him. And of course, it was also square his Pluto, and so I think that that solar arc direction had a big impact. Also, look at Jupiter from a solar arc perspective. His solar arc directed Jupiter was at 26 degrees Gemini, and so solar arc directed Jupiter was exactly opposition his moon. So, or indeed, it's moving towards an opposition his moon, very close. It will be exact in a few months' time. So Jupiter opposition moon, that's when he really feels he has to do something. It's a very exciting thing. It's a bit indulgent, perhaps, but I think that is an important solar arc direction there. And look at his Mercury. His solar arc Mercury is at 0 degrees 39 Cancer. So over the last 6 months, Mercury has moved across the Cancer. It's hit the Aries point, and yeah, this is a time where he feels that really he has to communicate. He's just got something to say. At first he wanted to communicate by, helping with the Trump campaign. That was his first impulse. But having talked to people and got their feedback, he now wants to return to the fray. So I think that all seems to work in terms of his solar arc directions. Now, what I wanted to consider was his Vedic chart. I mean, very quickly. So turning to his Vedic chart. So let's get to his Vedic chart. Okay, there we are. Okay, so here's Nigel Farage's Vedic chart, and the question is how does that fit in, and with this announcement, was this announcement perhaps inevitable? And so looking at his Vedic chart overall, one of the things you have to remember about Nigel Farage's chart, which is, probably his enemies can't deal with, is his Saturn. He has got, in his Vedic chart, Saturn in the 7th. He has got Dikbala. In other words, Saturn in the 7th works really well. Even if it's fallen, I mean, in this case, he's actually got Saturn in the in sidereal, in Vedic, in Aquarius. I know it's not in Aquarius in his Western chart, but he's got Saturn in Aquarius in the 7th, and so Saturn has Dikbala. It has directional strength in the 7th, and people who have Saturn in the 7th can be really hard to beat. They just won't go away. Like Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, she just wouldn't go away. I just couldn't believe how long she lasted as First Minister of Scotland. I didn't understand it, but she had Saturn in the 7th. I think she had Saturn in the 7th in Aries, but still, she wouldn't go away. He's got Saturn in Aquarius, and he just won't go away. And it's just that's the advantage of having Saturn in the 7th. You'd think it's a problem, but in a Vedic astrology, it can be a powerful advantage. And so with Nigel Farage, he has got the North Node, Rahu, in Gemini. Gemini is exalted. Rahu is exalted in Gemini. So he's got a strong Rahu. And that his Rahu Dasha, his period of life ruled by Rahu, started in 2012. And he's still there. He's still in it. And so it lasts through until 2030. So overall, this is a period where he's just going to be around. I mean, I don't think anything big is going to change for Nigel Farage in a major way until probably 2030. He could drop dead or whatever, but all things being equal, I don't think so. Now he see, the thing about Nigel Farage is he had a really difficult period, I think, from real soul searching, I think, from February 2023 to February 2024, and he was in the Rahu major period, Ketu sub period, and that's the head of a dragon and the tail of a dragon. It was all churning around, and it was probably very difficult for him. But then in February 2024, I think his luck changed. He went from Rahu sub period, major period, into Venus sub period, and there's his Venus. He's got Venus in Taurus. He's got Venus in Taurus in the 10th house. He's actually got Venus in Taurus in both the Western and Eastern charts. So there is his Venus in Taurus, well placed there in the 10th. And so that's what. So he's in his Rahu major period, Venus sub period, from 2024 to 2027, and I suspect this period is quite fortunate for him. And again, he does feel that he's got something to do and he's got something to offer. So I do think that his chart from a Vedic view, does look pretty good. Now, by the next election, he will be in Rahu major period, Moon sub period. And there is his Moon in the 5th house. I think the Moon actually so he's got Rahu's up there, Moon in his North Node in his 11th house, Moon in his 5th house. That kind of needs some thought, but I think this is going to because Rahu and the Moon are in opposite signs. I would have thought that period from January 2028 through to July 2029 could be really important, and that might relate to what is going on at the next election, not this election, but the election after that, which would potentially be 2029, and we need to give that some thought. But I think the overall picture from Nigel, in terms of Nigel Farage and his announcement, is that he's not going anywhere, and I don't think we can expect Nigel Farage to go anywhere, at least from a Vedic perspective, until 2030. And that's Saturn having directional strength. I think that really matters. Now, as far as Boris Johnson is concerned, there is this feeling that people have that Boris Johnson isn't. That some people still really like Boris Johnson, and there is a feeling that he's still there. He hasn't gone away. It's not like he lost an election. He feels hard done by. He was basically, you could argue, he's removed by his own party, and so people are thinking, when's he going to come back? Okay, he probably won't be elected I don't think he's standing for a seat this election. I think he's got other things to do. He's got to make some money, hasn't he? I think he's making a lot of money now. What about his comeback? Here is Boris Johnson's horoscope again. I think I actually looked at his chart last week, but this time I want to consider Boris Johnson's chart from the perspective of maybe what might be going wrong. Now, he has got Sun and Venus. He's got a very close Sun-Venus conjunction, not quite Cazimi conjunction, but we've just had a Sun-Venus conjunction, or we've got a Sun-Venus conjunction right now, Cazimi. So that might be echoing with Boris's Sun-Venus conjunction, both in Gemini. So maybe he is feeling that. And that Sun-Venus conjunction I'm more concerned about what happens to it next year, because that Sun-Venus conjunction is going to be hit by Saturn. See, Saturn is now at about, he's just had his Saturn return at the beginning of the year. Now Saturn is at about 19 Pisces. So Saturn is about to go stationary direct square his Mercury. That's going to happen to him, and it'll move off. I think it goes stationary at about 1926 at the end of this month. 1926 Pisces, and he's got his Mercury at 1919 Gemini. So that could be a bit difficult. So it may be that for Boris, as he moves into the not that he's standing in the election, but at the time of the election, he may be feeling a bit sorry for himself for one reason or another. There might be something bothering him. And then Mercury goes retrograde, and then it goes forward again, and then next year, Saturn... Sorry, did I say Mercury? Saturn will go retrograde. Saturn will keep going retrograde. Then it will go stationary. And then it will hit Boris's Sun-Venus conjunction. So he will have this Sun-Venus conjunction being hit by Saturn. And also, later in the year, look at his moon. His moon is at 0 degrees Scorpio. So Pluto is going retrograde, and it goes back to 0 degrees Aquarius, and it will square his moon. Then it will go retrograde into Capricorn, and then it will go forward again, and it will square his moon again. So there are a few problems building up for Boris. And if we look at his solar return, so he's got a birthday coming up, June the 19th. So his birthday is in 2 weeks' time, and so maybe I'll look at Boris's solar return now. There's his solar return. This is direct solar return, and it's quite nasty, this solar return. There's that moon in Scorpio, moon at 24-22 Scorpio. And it is opposition Uranus. And moon on the 8th house cusp, Uranus on the 2nd house cusp. That is quite disturbing. Something really bothers Boris. It might make him accident prone. I mean, I think that is possible. And look at his sun. Sun 28-27 Gemini is square Neptune. So that is an aspect he has been having on and off, Neptune square his sun. So that doesn't help either. And I don't know whether it's relevant that he's got Chiron rising in his solar return. So his direct solar return certainly raises some issues. And I think moon opposition Uranus, I think, is a worry. His converse solar return, so this is his 60th birthday. He was born in 1964, so we would look at 1904. So this is his solar return for 1904. I don't think it's quite so dramatic. Well, in fact, remember, in his direct solar return, he had, moon opposition Uranus. In his converse solar return, I set this for June the 20th, 1904, in New York, he's got Mars moving to an opposition of Uranus, and he's got Venus. In fact, look at that Mars, Venus, Sun opposition Uranus. That strikes me as being difficult. And the moon is there as well. Moon is moving to a square of Uranus. So his solar return and his converse return are looking bad. And so I'm just wondering what's happening with Boris. I think that something's going to go wrong with Boris. And I suppose I can speculate using my own prejudices. And if you've been watching my videos, you know I have prejudices. We all have prejudices. And what I would like to consider is Boris's horoscope, but relocated. This is a horoscope that I've looked at before, but it's quite a fascinating horoscope. So Boris was one of the main instigators of the West's, or Britain's and NATO's proxy war against Russia. The beginning of 2022, Ukraine was pretty much signed up to having a peace deal with Ukraine on, well, if you look at the situation now, on pretty good terms by contrast to what the situation is now. And that indeed Russia was, you could say, some critics of Putin would have regarded that as being really giving Ukraine perhaps more than it needed to give away, but it was a good deal probably. But Boris went to Kiev, remember, and according to the story, he said, they would give, the West would give Ukraine as much support as it needed, and there was no need to have this post-peace deal, so Ukraine pulled out. And as a result, we've had this continuous war in which, I don't know, depends on what estimate you use, seems like 500,000 Ukrainians were killed. That's a lot. So Boris, well, I remember watching that video when he went to Kiev. I mean, to be honest, he looked great. He looked happy. He was going to Kiev. It was like he was going somewhere. He was coming home. He just felt comfortable. You almost felt. I hate to say this. You almost felt a bit proud, didn't you? Look at Boris. Everyone loves Boris. Even in Kiev. Because I'm not someone who naturally has a problem with Boris. Maybe it's because I'm a Gemini, but I kind of like Boris. Well, I don't anymore, but when he was in Kiev, there was something like, I thought, maybe I'm just naive, there was something quite magnificent about it. But anyway, we know what was going on. We seem to know what was going on. It was almost like he was going to his constituency in Kiev. But here is Boris's chart. If we relocate his chart, for Kiev, and I think this has relevance. Although I've looked at this chart before, I haven't kind of tried to look at it in a predictive sense. So if we relocate Boris's chart to Kiev, so there's his natal chart, born in New York. But at that precise moment he was born in New York, if we just switch it to Kiev, and so that's the chart for Kiev. Now, amazing thing about this chart is that when you switch his chart to Kiev, that moon in Scorpio, remember he's got moon 0 degrees Scorpio, that moon in Scorpio moves to the midheaven. As he's got moon on the midheaven, relocated for Kiev. Moon is the people, feeling comfortable. I remember watching him being greeted by people in Kiev. He just felt comfortable there. He should have moved to Kiev. He seemed happy there. And that's why he just has a natural rapport with Ukraine and its capital. It seems to be natural. It seems to be something he was born with. At that precise moment that Boris was born, the moon was on the midheaven in Kiev. And so he's just gravitated to that place, and it seems gravitated towards continuing with that war. And don't forget, it's moon in Scorpio. It's not a great moon. It's quite a nasty moon in Scorpio. And I think in terms of Boris's chart, it's got all that Gemini, but that moon in Scorpio suggests a sort of an unpleasantness that underlies the whole thing that we don't actually see, and perhaps a vindictiveness as well. And so there is his Kiev chart. But it's not just the moon, it's his Sun-Venus conjunction. That Sun-Venus conjunction I was talking about is on his descendant. And so what happens is that we have got Saturn. When does Saturn? I should have looked this up beforehand. So if you look at 2025, beginning of 2025, Saturn starts to gather speed through Pisces. So it makes this aspect actually in May 2025. So not it's okay. It's a bit of time. Takes a bit of time, but in the end, Saturn will make that square to his Sun-Venus conjunction, and it will also be making a square to his descendant set for Kiev. So this point becomes really important from his whole relationship with Ukraine, because that's where his chart is sort of relocated to. So I think that square of Saturn to his Sun-Venus conjunction does impact his relationship with Ukraine. By the way, just show you his astrocartography, just to show you what I mean in a really graphic way. Okay, that's a chart for the world. Let's just make it a chart for. You see, there's that moon. This is a place. This is where he was. Whoops! Where he was born. There's moon over Kiev. And there is that Sun-Venus conjunction. So let's just home in on Ukraine. Let's just quickly do that, and we want Ukraine. There it is. There's Ukraine. Okay. So there's Ukraine. There's Crimea. There's Kiev. You can see that moon line goes right the way through Kiev. And there's that Sun-Venus conjunction. There's all the places where the Sun and Venus was setting. And so it crosses right here. So this crossing is pretty much on Kiev. And I do think that is absolutely amazing. And it's amazing the way that links Boris with Ukraine and why he was just so compelled to get involved with this war. I mean, maybe we shouldn't blame him. Maybe it was just had to be. Maybe he was born to get and do this. But so what I'm trying to say is that I've looked at a number of things. I looked at his solar return. I've looked at his converse solar return. I've looked at his direct solar return for the year from 2024 to 2025. He's got some difficult Saturn transits coming up between now and then. So how is this going to manifest? So one theory might be that how it's going to manifest is that, at the moment in Britain, there are a lot of people that hate Boris, particularly on the left in Britain, and they hate him for Partygate, and they hate him for being a conservative, and they hate him for winning elections, and they hate him for getting involved in Brexit, and they hate him for a number of reasons. But what they don't hate him for is for the worst thing he did, which was stirring up this war in Ukraine. Now that is what he perhaps should be hated for. But when is that going to change? When are people going to start hating Boris for what he did to Ukraine? And I'm thinking that this is what we're talking about, that this astrology, which at the moment, is this solar return, the fact that he's got Pluto hitting his moon, all this stuff that's starting to build up, it may be this is when the war goes wrong in Ukraine, and then people want to know who to blame. Look at what happened to Tony Blair. Tony Blair's reputation was seriously tarnished because of his involvement in the war in Iraq and getting involved in all this fake stuff about weapons of mass destruction. So it's perhaps what we're seeing is Boris Johnson going the way of Tony Blair, but much, much worse. Much worse, I would have said. So that is an argument. So getting back to what I was talking about to begin with, Boris Johnson, is he going to be a feature of the political environment over the next few years? I'm suggesting maybe not, and it may be because of a certain awareness at some point people are going to realize what he did in Ukraine and start to, instead of just ignore it or praise him, they're going to actually blame him. And the moment that happens, he could become a pariah. So that is one way it could work. And that's not an issue. I mean, Nigel Farage has not quite got that problem. Well, he was never in power. I mean, he was always sympathetic to Ukraine, but recently he's been sort of sitting on the fence, as far as I can see, a little bit. So that's Boris Johnson. And finally, I wanted to look at Kemi Badenoch. So Kemi Badenoch is, I don't have her time of birth. She was born in Wimbledon, which is in South London, and she was born on January the 2nd, 1980. So just as the new decade, when 1980 was beginning. And she is the favourite to take over from Rishi Sunak, as far as I understand it. I haven't been to Britain for 5 years, so I think that's what people are saying. So the question is, what are her chances? Is she the person to lead the Tories back to power? I'm not really going to be able to answer that question right now. But I wanted to, as far as her chart is concerned, she is very earthy. She's got loads of stuff in earth signs. She's got Sun in Aquarius, Sun in Capricorn. She's got Jupiter in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, Saturn in Virgo. Now, as for Mercury, well, that depends when she was born. I think if she was born after 8:02 a.m., her Mercury would be in Capricorn. If she was born before 8:02 a.m., her Mercury would be in Sagittarius. So maybe at some stage we'll find out her time of birth. But right now, I don't know what it is. So potentially, and statistically, there's a 2/3 chance, assuming babies are born with equal frequency across a 24 hours period. I don't know whether that's true or not. But there's a 2/3 chance that her Mercury is in Capricorn. So she would seem to be quite earthy. And a sensible, focused Capricorn. And she has no fire in her chart. She's got Neptune in Sagittarius. Boris doesn't have any fire to speak of in his chart either. So if you've got no fire, in your chart, that means you're looking. In this case, I think you're kind of looking for action. You have to make a special effort to get attention. I think, like Boris does, and she was also born on a full moon, like Princess Catherine. Princess Catherine was born with moon in Capricorn, moon in Cancer, Sun in Capricorn. So you could say that moon in Capricorn, moon in Cancer is quite a patriotic sign. The country, the nation. So she shows. So yes, so she has patriotism, which is of course I suppose important if you want to be a Conservative member of Parliament. Conservative leader, but it's opposition Cancer. So it's always opposition Sun in Capricorn. So there's always that with that full moon, you can sort of move from Capricorn to Cancer very quickly. So moon in Cancer is very sort of emotional, feeling. Strong feelings, a certain vulnerability there. But then the Sun in Capricorn is really tough. This is the stuff we've got to do. We cannot get too emotional about it. I said I don't have a time of birth, so I don't have an immediate sense of quite how that full moon is working. But when you've got a full moon like that, people can shift very quickly between the two axes. And yeah, she's got a load of stuff in Virgo, so it strikes me as being a very sensible chart, a very sort of very earthy chart. And I was interested in the connection between this chart and the 1066 chart. So this is a chart I like to use. You know, when William I was crowned, when William the Conqueror was crowned King of England on Christmas Day 1066. I think that's So in the I've taken the England chart in the middle. So this is the England chart in the middle, and which is effectively, it becomes a chart of the UK is in the middle, and her chart is on the outer wheel. So she was born December the 2nd. Now, if you convert that, that's a Gregorian date. So December the 2nd, so probably that's equivalent to probably about December the 27th if you convert it to Julian off the top of my head. So her sun is at 11:15, or even the 26th, convert it maybe even 26. Her sun is at 11:15 Capricorn. England's sun is at 9:55 Capricorn. So her sun and England's sun are pretty much in the same place. It's like with George Bush Jr. When George Bush Jr. was elected, you know, he was the one who was elected president in 2000. He was born on July the 6th, 1946. So his sun was pretty much in the same place as America's sun. America has its sun at, obviously, at wherever the sun was on July, because America's birthday is July the 4th, 1776. So having your sun in the same place as the country which you want to be leader of can be really useful. So that helps. And she's also got Sun Jupiter trine as well. So her Jupiter in Virgo is trine England's sun, and which is by extension becomes UK's sun if you take that coronation chart as being a core horoscope. So that Sun Jupiter conjunction is really kind of supported there. And also she's got England has its North Node in Virgo, and she's got her Mars is fairly close to that. And so England, you can see, looking at England's chart, as a Capricorn country, I think it kind of resonates with her chart as well. You know, she is with perhaps the conservative streak in the country, that North Node in Virgo rather than South Node in Pisces. And she has actually got her North Node in Virgo, which is the same. She's got her North Node in the same sign as England, and obviously by definition the South Node in the same sign as well. So she very much reflects that, and so I think that there is something about her that sensibleness, I think, does seem to chime with the UK chart or the English chart. And so that suggests that maybe she could become a Conservative Prime Minister, that she might resonate with the British people in the end, though she probably has to get her timing right. I mean, I'm not making an astrological point here, but normally when a party gets really seriously defeated at an election, the first leader who they choose is often a disaster. The second leader is often a disaster, but sometimes the third leader is a disaster. And then finally it's the fourth leader that that gets there. So it often happens like that. Very often, but usually the first leader they choose after a big defeat is not the one who makes it. I suppose 1945, Winston Churchill lost, and I suppose the Conservatives stuck with Winston Churchill, and he became Prime Minister again in 1951. But if you think about the Conservatives, when they lost in 1997, they went through William Hague, Michael Howard, Ian Duncan Smith. Was that right? Is that his name? And then it was not until the fourth one, David Cameron, that they chose him. Or like when Labour lost in 1979, they went through Cameron and Callaghan. Well, Callaghan was the Prime Minister who lost, then it was Michael Foot, and then it was Neil Kinnock, and then John Smith, and then he died. So again, finally, I think, so Tony Blair was the fourth leader after that. So it takes time. So it's going to be tough for her to be a new leader if she does get elected, although she is a favourite, and then to stick it through for 5 years, because if you look at past history, after big defeats, the first leader generally doesn't last. So we'll have to see what happens, but she would have to be very persistent. And notice she's got her Mars at 14 Virgo and her Saturn at 27 Virgo, so she's going to have Saturn. If she does become leader, she'll have Saturn opposition her Mars, Saturn opposition Saturn. So it would be tough for her. But I think, looking at things in a very general sense, I do think that there is some evidence that she could be a leader who the British people go for in the end, because she reflects the conservative nature of England's 1066 horoscope. Okay, that's it for British politics. I do understand that you may not be interested in British politics, but I saw the announcement that Nigel Farage had actually decided to stand for election, and I just had to say something. I had to say something about it. By the way, one final chart before I go, which is just to illustrate a point of something I tried to do. What I wanted to do was I wanted to know whether Nigel Farage was going to win when he stands in his place Clacton. So I asked this horary chart. So I asked the question: is he going to win in Clacton? So I asked this chart at June the 3rd, 1:39. In Washington State. And just to show you what the problem with horary charts is, at least the way I use them, is that I use these things called strictures. So you can see that in this chart, Saturn is in the 7th house. And so William Lilly, when he wrote his book, Christian Astrology, he had Saturn in the 7th. He said that if you have a horary chart and the Saturn is in the 7th, it means that the astrologer's judgment is at fault. What does that mean? It means I can't judge the chart. So this is a problem. So although I did ask a horary, because Saturn is in the 7th, I cannot read the chart. So I have not got a good horary, a clean horary, which tells me whether or not I can answer the question. So although I did remember to ask whether Farage is going to win the election, that particular horary can't be read. And it doesn't matter what else you see, Saturn in the 7th, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of my practice, maybe it's overly conservative with a small c. Perhaps I would not read. I'm not reading that chart. Okay, that's my final chart. So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for bearing with me. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed this video and you're not subscribed, I would of course be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.